Hello everyone, welcome back to Pixel Viilage and I'm Radha Krishnan. RAW or JPEG? This one question is probably as old as the chicken or egg kind of puzzle. Well, the second one probably don't have a clear-cut answer, but in the case of RAW or JPEG, the jury is still divided. We also did a video on RAW or JPEG and we tried to kind of explain RAW still is way superior to JPEG. Well, but of course from the comments we realized that while most of them tend to agree to the fact that RAW is superior in terms of quality, but in terms of convenience there is no comparison to a JPEG. So, since we realized that there are so many people who still wish to shoot JPEG, we thought it's only appropriate that we create a video where we help you to shoot JPEGs better. In this video, what we're going to see is by making a small modification in the way you shoot JPEG, you can actually retain a little more information in your highlight and get a little better shadows with less grains and less digital noise. Let's see how it's done. This video is sponsored by Squarespace. From websites and online stores to marketing tools and analytics, Squarespace is the all-in-one platform to build a beautiful online presence and run your business. For demonstration, we are using a D810 with a 35mm f1.4G lens. Okay. First thing is to make sure that you are recording the best quality JPEG. So image quality, pick the JPEG fine or the finest quality because some of the newer Sony cameras offer you super fine JPEG quality. So pick that one, and JPEG and TIFF recording, make sure that the image size is the largest and the JPEG compression is based on optimal quality. Very unlike the RAW compression which can be lossless because it's data, here it's image already. So if you use a size priority compression, you tend to lose the quality of the image. So prefer the compression for based on optimal quality. And what you need to next check is, of course, white balance, very critical. To record a good quality image, your white balance needs to be accurate. In Nikons, our preferred way of choosing a white balance is using the preset manual setting. Very simple. I'm sure it's called custom white balancing in many other cameras. Use that and set your white balance right so that you get your colors properly. Also select Adobe RGB as the working color space because you're going to actually technically convert a RAW image into a JPEG. Avoid selecting sRGB because then you would have thrown away a whole lot of information because Adobe RGB is much wider color space and sRGB is a smaller one. Okay, so Adobe RGB, and then next after that go to the picture style. Now in picture styles, as you know, you have standard, neutral, vivid, monochrome, portrait, landscape, a whole series of preset picture controls available. Now what we are recommending is stay with neutral and make your corrections, sharpness all the way down, contrast all the way down, saturation by 2 points, and say OK, and you save it as neutral profile. Now this I'm going to call it neutral 3 because we already had saved the neutral 2. So once it is saved, it will be available at the bottom for you to use whenever you want to. Now what are we going to do? We're going to shoot two situations, one high dynamic range kind of scenario and one a very predictable. Of course, it will also have highlight, shadows and midtones. Shoot them with neutral, shoot them in portrait, shoot them in flat. Flat is a profile which is usually used for filming. Some cameras don't have it. So That's why we are trying to actually tell you to modify an existing one, and also with the modified neutral 3 profile. So we basically will get 1, 2, 3, 4 different images, and when you compare, you will know what we really mean. Let's get into the shoot. So the setup is very simple. We have our in-house model here. She got a Macbeth color chart next to her, and she is kind of positioned in front of a really contrasty kind of situation. So if I take a reading, a spot meter reading, let's say I'm shooting at f4, reading says 160 on the face, the sky is 2000, okay, very bright, and our shadow on the other side is 1/15. So you can see, there's a great difference in the exposure value. So it's a high dynamic kind of a range shoot. Okay, so I am ready for the shoot. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the metric metering or the evaluative metering in the camera for the shoot, because that's what will average out and give you a reading. Of course, you can also use spot metering if you're an expert and if you know what exposure that you want to key in. The first shot is going to be in neutral, picture style, profile, whatever that you wish to call, and that is on neutral. I'm going to go straight away to portrait, the portrait profile. Okay, that is done. And some cameras, while setting up, some cameras have a flat profile. Cameras which are usually known for their video capabilities give you this flat profile. So I'm going to use the flat profile too. Without any editing, I'm going to shoot the flat profile, and then I'm going to go and use our edited neutral profile, picture style. Okay, perfect. So we have now about 3-4 images in the camera, this is the high dynamic kind of setup. Now let us go to a rather predictable, more even lighting setup. Of course, you will have a highlight, a midtone and a shadow area, but not with such great contrast. So let's set that up and shoot these routine, or go through this routine once again in that setup too. Okay, let's change this to the next one. Okay, so option number 2, the more predictable one, shot number 1, which is in neutral. Okay, let me change that to portrait. Okay, and to flat, and to our custom modified neutral profile. Now let's take a closer look at the images using the computer. All right, so we have imported all the 8 files into Lightroom. Let's look at the first scenario with high contrast, high dynamic range images. This one on your screen is the one which is shot with no modification to the neutral profile. This one is with portrait. This one is the one with the flat profile, and this is the modified one. You can actually see small differences between all 4 files. Now, the objective is to extract more details from the shadow and also pull a little more information from the highlight, which usually is very limited in JPEG. What we are trying to tell you is that if we make those fine modification to your picture styles while shooting, you will get a little more elbow room to work with your highlights and your shadow. Let's go to the neutral profile and enlarge, magnify the image. Now I'm looking at it as 3:1. So it's actually way bigger. And what I'm trying to do is here, if you look at here, the shadow is clipped a bit. I'm trying to open up the shadow. So shadow, let me try and open till okay. The idea is I want to see a little more information here, around here, okay. So shadow, you can actually see a little bit of grains breaking out here as we try and open the shadow. We'll come to the highlight later. Let's go to the image which is shot with the portrait style. Here also, let's try and open up the shadow. Okay, the shadow is opened to the extent all should get, similar kind of opening here. So now this is like that. This is the flat profile. Let me try and open the shadow up a bit more. As you can see it relatively easier. The shadow opens up relatively easier. And this one is our modified neutral profile. And let's try and open it and see how very easily it's also opening up. Okay. Now, this has some grains now. Very understandably, the grains in the flat profile will be less, but not many cameras have it. Hence, if it is available, use it. Otherwise, use the modified one. Now look at what happens to the portrait one. It has so much of grains and still not managed to open the shadow sufficiently. And this is the one with the neutral mode. Comparison to the modified one, this has more grains and these color bleeding a little bit here, and also the shadows have not been opened up sufficiently. Now let me from this quickly jump to the modified neutral. You will actually see more opening, but you don't really see the color, too much of color grains. Now you must remember this is 3 times magnified. So at 1:1, this is 1:1, neutral, portrait, flat, and this is the modified one. Now what you actually require is a little more color here, because you have to match a little color, skin color, correct? You remember we had to reduce the saturation there a little bit. So let me add a little bit of the color. Okay. So you managed to extract more information out from the shadow. Let's go back. Neutral, portrait, this is the flat, and this one is the modified neutral. Now, as you can see, we managed to get more details from the shadow. Now let's look at the highlights. Okay, so highlights, let's go to the first one. This is the neutral without any modification. Let's try and pull some information till, yeah, that's it. We just managed to, avoid the clipping. Let's go to the next image and let's try and pull the highlight. Okay, this is what we managed to get. The next one is the flat. Okay, we managed to get this much, and this one is our modified one. Let's try and pull. Now you must remember that highlights are usually the most difficult one to pull when it comes to JPEGs. Okay, so let's go to the first one. Look at the way the highlights are. This is the portrait one. This is the flat, and this one is the modified one. Now in this modified one, you will have a little more freedom to pull and get more information on from your highlight. You will get the same in the flat too, but in here, even if you do, what you will get is a more like a cutout here, because it's actually is gone. There's nothing there. Let's click on that. This is your neutral, portrait, flat, and our modified one. The image with the modified profile gives you a much better roll-off of the contrast in this. Now, there are two things that we need to add. We need to add a little more saturation to match, okay? And you will add a little more sharpening, because you had reduced sharpening in the while modifying the profile. So let's look at the face. Starting the first image, too bright, too contrasty. This is the portrait one. This is the flat pictures profile. And this one is the modified one. Now the roll-off is much more even. You've not really lost any colors, and you have more information in the shadow area in comparison, without losing too much in the highlights. Let's go through it after. Now these are very basic corrections that you've done. Now look at those images once more. Neutral, portrait, flat, and our modified one. Now this obviously has more information in the shadow and in the highlight, and when it comes to shadow, this has much less amount of digital noise. Let's now similarly compare the second scenario. Okay, so this is the one which is shot with the neutral profile. Okay, let's go to the shadow area. Let's go to the highlight area. Similarly, pull the shadow a little. Okay, this is my corrected image. Portrait, I need to open the shadow. Okay, and highlight. Okay, so this is the one which is, with basic correction of shadow and highlight. Now this actually, the shadow is sufficiently opened because I don't see any clipping happening here. Only the highlight needs to be addressed. So I'm just pulling the highlight a little. Okay, and to our modified one. In the modified one, of course, it needs a little bit of shadow recovery, very little, and shadows. Now let's go into the shadow area of the first one, neutral. That's portrait. This is flat. Flat actually has very little, grains. And this is our modified one. Now, as you can see, modified one is nice and bright. We need to add a little bit of, saturation, because we had knocked off a little bit of saturation, and we also need to add a little bit of sharpening because we had knocked off sharpening too. So now let's go backwards. Flat, portrait. You can actually see grains here. This is neutral. You can again see grains here. And going back to our modified one, bright, open, the grains are not that prominent. Similarly, in the highlights, look at the highlights. This is the modified one, flat. Obviously, we'll have more highlight information because it's flat. This is the portrait one, will be more contrasty. And this is the neutral without modification. So if you look here, you can actually see more shadow and more information on the highlight. In case if you like, you can add a little bit of the contrast. Let's go to the top. Neutral, portrait, flat, and the modified one. This has, to me, to my eyes, much greater information both on the highlight and in the shadow with lesser amount of noise, grains. So if you apply this technique to your JPEG, because you're going to work on the JPEG anyway, if you do this small modification and shoot in a modified neutral profile or flat profile if your camera already has it, you will be able to get more out of your JPEG.
I would like to definitely thank Squarespace for sponsoring this video. I, as a commercial photographer, have been using Squarespace for the last 7.5 years, and I have always enjoyed. I'm not really a techie. I can't really create and maintain a website, but with Squarespace, all my previous horrendous experience that I had with website designers and coordinating with them and updating and upgrading and all that vanished. And in flat 2 hours, I built my website, and ever since I've been maintaining my website myself. So thank you, Squarespace, once again. And if you would like to use Squarespace, yes, we have a link in the description using which you can get a 10% discount. So please go check it out, sign up, and about 14 days of usage is free, after which if you would like to continue using, like I said, use our promo code and get 10% discount.
Well, if you're a photographer who wants to learn photography and take your photography to the next level and you want to learn at the comfort of your home, well, Pixel Viilage now has an online photography training platform.
Head over to Pixel Viilage. We have an online photography education platform where we have lined up some of the finest photography mentors in this country just for you.
Bye for now.